Hey party people, I'm Pastor Leah Scholl from Wake Forest Baptist Church here in beautiful Winston-Salem, and I'm grateful that you have decided to join me today. Today is the first Sunday of Advent, and we are talking about Hagar and Mary and what it takes to birth new life. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Godly play teaches us that a prophet is someone who comes so close to God, and God comes so close to them that they know what God wants. We tend to think of Jonas or Jeremiah or Isaiah when we think of the Old Testament prophets, and yet today we meet Hagar. You likely know her backstory. She's a slave girl, likely from Egypt, in the household of Abram and Sarai. Sarai, bereft from not being able to have a child, brings Hagar to her husband, and they have a son, Ishmael. And let's be honest, this is not a consensual coupling. Hagar begins to resent Sarai. The New Revised Standard Version says she looked with contempt upon her mistress, and the New International Version says she despised her mistress. Sarai tries to get Abram to take control of Hagar, but he refuses and says to Sarah, "Deal with her as you will." So Sarai dealt harshly with her, and Hagar ran away. And it's then that Hagar, the slave girl, comes so close to God, and God comes so close to her. We find Hagar in our text by a spring of water in the wilderness, met by a messenger of the all-seeing God. The messenger tells Hagar to return to Sarai and subject herself to Sarai. The messenger of God assures Hagar that God has heard of her abuse, but if she returns, there's a promise. A son who will be a, quote, wild ass of a man, with his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and that he shall live in the sight of all of his kin. Can you imagine why that's a promise? If you have been abused, you know that you must live in secret, yet her son will live out loud in the view of everyone. If you have been a slave, you live trying to avoid the hand against you, and her son will live with his hand against everyone. He will fight back. Do you see? Hagar, the slave girl, has come so close to God, and God has come so close to her that she knows what God wants. She must return to Sarai, and she, Hagar, the slave girl, will have a wild and free son. This promise, this annunciation, is so huge that it parallels the promise to Abram. Hagar, the slave girl's seed, will be greatly multiplied, just like the promise to Abram a few chapters earlier. Hagar and Rebekah are the only two women credited with their own seed. Usually, this wording is reserved for men. And Hagar is the first of three women in the Bible granted an annunciation. It's Hagar, the unnamed mother of Samson, and Mary, the mother of Jesus in the New Testament. Hagar, the slave girl, is not unlike the young Mary, greeted by a messenger of God, and Mary's response, "Here am I, the woman slave of God. Let it be with me according to your will." That's the thing, y'all. Usually these women in the text are treated like incubators, vessels for God's plan. But I posit to you that they are more than that they are co-conspirators with God. They are, as Dr. Will Gaffney has put it, theologians and divine conversation partners with God. Dr. Gaffney continues, they are also evidence that God is concerned with those who are at the bottom of all the hierarchies, women, the enslaved, foreigners, and as is so often the case, persons in more than one category, all of them for Hagar, whose overlapping identities result in intersectional oppressions. And God becomes the midwife, or even better, the doula, bringing forth the future of hope through these women. You know, a doula is a professional labor coach who provides physical and emotional support to women during pregnancy, childbirth, and the postpartum period. They're different than midwives because midwives provide medical care during the pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. But they don't stay with a woman while she's in labor. Doulas work with a few things in mind. First, that women's bodies work and women know what to do with them. Second, that the doulas listen to their charges and validate their feelings and experiences. Doulas don't direct the way for a woman to give birth. They support the new mother's decisions. And doulas aren't there for the medical stuff. They're there for physical and emotional support. And finally, doulas stay with you throughout your labor and birth experience. She's there the whole time. Can't you see how God is like a doula? Look, y'all, and this is key. Women know this. Hagar knew this. Mary knew this. There is always a bit of suffering before new life can be brought forth. Sometimes you have to stay in a terrible situation like Hagar. Sometimes you have to endure fear, shame, and worry like Mary. There is always suffering before great joy. There is no such thing as a painless birth. And we say yes to it. Yes, we will suffer. And yes, we will bring forth new life. Y'all, there are so many areas in life right now where I believe that this is true. I believe it about the pandemic, that we are in the midst of suffering and yet new life is to come. I believe it about white supremacy, that we're continuing to suffer, but yet new life will come. I believe it about capitalism, that we are in the midst of all of this suffering, but when capitalism is over, new life will come. I believe it about prisons, the suffering that's happening now, but new life will come. And I believe it about higher education, about the ecology and the climate change, and about our political future too. And yes, I believe it about the church. And I believe it about our church, Wake Forest Baptist Church. We have suffered and new life is on its way. And yes, God will be with us the whole time, providing physical and emotional support, because God believes in us and in what we are bringing forth. God is invested in our hope for the future. So I wonder, where has hope been enunciated, announced in your life? And what will you have to suffer before new life is brought forth? I wonder, how might God be a doula to you, staying with you, supporting your decisions, listening and guiding you? I wonder, where has hope been enunciated to our church? And where is hope bursting through our church right now? And I wonder, how might God be a doula to our church? Wake Forest Baptist Church, I love being your pastor. I'll see you soon.